At his own engagement party, my son raised his glass and said, "If my mom starts acting weird tonight, don't worry. She's kinda gone off mentally." People laughed. One woman clapped. I was standing right there, holding dessert. That's the night he didn't just humiliate me. He started trying to legally wipe me out. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe. And please tell me and others, what's one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? Share it in the comments below. Thanks. It happened on a Friday night in early May. Travis was standing under those white string lights we'd helped him hang earlier that week, holding a glass of overpriced whiskey and laughing with his friends, and then he did it. He looked right at the group and said, "Just a heads up, if my mom says anything weird tonight, just smile. Early dementia's a hell of a thing." I was 5 feet away, holding a lemon tart I'd made from scratch, crust still warm. There was a ripple of laughter, then awkward silence, then more laughter from the people who didn't know me well enough to care. I didn't drop the tray. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked back into the kitchen and stood there staring at the sink like it had answers. That was the exact second I realized my own son didn't see me as a person anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. I'd seen signs before, little things. He'd started managing my bank account just to help with bills, the doctor appointments he insisted on scheduling, the phone calls I never got from friends anymore. I thought maybe I was overreacting. I'm not. That night, I waited until everyone left. I stayed in my room while the music played and people drank and danced. Nobody came to check on me. Around midnight, the lights went out one by one, and I heard the door close. Then I got out of bed, grabbed a yellow legal pad, and wrote one sentence. May 3rd. He publicly said I had dementia. The next morning, I checked my online banking. Locked out. I tried the backup password. Nothing. I texted Travis. "Did something change with the bank?" No response. I checked again an hour later and saw a note in the app. Access temporarily suspended by primary. I wasn't the primary. He was. That was the first day I started writing everything down. The notebook stayed in my purse, in my bathroom cabinet, by my bedside. Every weird look, every patronizing comment, every time someone repeated something back to me like I was a child. I stopped trusting my reflection. I stopped answering phone. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I started testing myself, reading out loud, doing word puzzles, remembering numbers backwards just to prove I could. I wasn't slipping. I knew I wasn't. But Travis was making damn sure everyone else thought I was. And if I didn't stop it now, if I didn't document everything, I knew what came next. Assisted living brochures, a revoked driver's license, a silent nod between siblings, and a slow, quiet erasure of who I used to be. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not to me. Not to the woman who raised 2 kids on a single teacher's salary and never missed a mortgage payment. Not to the woman who kept her husband out of hospice so he could die in his own home. Not to the woman who still wakes up at 6:30 every morning out of habit. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this much. Travis had just declared war, and he had no idea who he was up against. The first real hit didn't come from Travis. It came from the house itself. I started noticing small things going missing or moving, like my keys not being where I swore I left them, my reading glasses showing up in the freezer, and my favorite coffee mug somehow ending up in the bathroom cabinet. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I was just tired. But then it kept happening, too often, too perfectly timed. I'd make a list and then the list would vanish. I'd prep my pills for the week, and suddenly 2 days would be empty, and I hadn't taken them yet. Then came the phone call. A nurse from a clinic I'd never visited called to confirm my follow-up appointment for cognitive testing. I said she had the wrong number, but she read back my full name, address, and date of birth. I didn't have an appointment. I hadn't made one. When I hung up, my hand was shaking. I checked my calendar app, the one Travis set up for me, and there it was, an appointment for next Thursday at 11:30 a.m., labeled simply memory. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my own shoes for 20 straight minutes. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink much. Just sat there trying to remember if I had actually made the appointment and somehow forgotten, or if this was something else entirely. The moment I stood up, I felt it. this cold ripple through my chest like a warning bell. That was when I opened my medicine cabinet and checked the pill bottles. I lined them up. All looked normal at first glance. But then I noticed my anxiety. Medication looked slightly different. Same name, different color. I pulled out the label and compared it to my previous refill and saw the numbers didn't match. I hadn't changed pharmacies. Travis had picked them up for me as a favor. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up cross-referencing side effects, Googling interactions, and writing everything down in that yellow notebook. I called the pharmacy in the morning and asked who picked up my meds. The voice on the other end got real quiet, then said, "It was picked up by a male family member on file. Says authorized." I hadn't authorized anyone. Not on paper, not on the phone. And then the worst moment hit. Not a discovery, not a trap, but doubt. I sat in the kitchen that morning staring at my hands, and for the first time, I actually whispered, "What if he's right? What if I am starting to slip?" That fear hit harder than anything else. Because once you start questioning yourself, it's over. That's what they count on. That little crack in your own memory, your own confidence. I stood up fast, walked straight to the laundry room, and opened every drawer and cabinet looking for something, anything, that didn't belong. And that's when I saw it, right there above the dryer, tucked behind a roll of paper towels, a small black device with a tiny red light flashing every few seconds. A nanny cam, one of those little button lens cameras shaped like an air freshener. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't scream. I didn't yank it down. I just leaned in close, let it see my face, and said one word out loud, "Gotcha." Then I turned around, walked out of the laundry room, and picked up my notebook. The page I wrote that day said, May 4th, hidden surveillance discovered in my own house. No more doubt. This is real. That was the moment I stopped wondering and started preparing. Travis had made his first real move. I was going to make my next one count. Eli came over that Saturday like he always did every other weekend, 15 years old with too much screen time and a permanent smirk, and I was trying to act normal, making pancakes like I always had since he was little, and I asked him to hand me the salt, but I said sugar by mistake, just one slip, nothing serious. And he laughed, pulled out his phone, and said, "Say that again, Grandma." And I did, thinking maybe he missed it, or maybe he just wanted to help, but I should have known better. Because 3 hours after he left, I got a call from one of the women in my church group asking if I was okay, and when I asked why, she said, "We saw the video." And that's when I knew something was wrong, really wrong, because I don't do videos, I don't post online, and I sure as hell didn't know what she was talking about. So I hung up and opened the Facebook app I barely use, logged in, and there it was, shared from Eli's Instagram story, now re-uploaded by someone else with the caption, "When grandma.exe starts glitching," and the clip was just me, confused. For 2 seconds, repeating myself, cut with music and subtitles that made it look like I'd been talking nonsense for hours, and it had over 400 likes, 200 shares, and comments like, "She needs help for," and "This is kinda sad, NGL." And the worst part wasn't the video. It was the fact that I knew Travis let him do it, maybe even told him to, maybe even planned it, because Eli's too young to understand the weight of something like this on his own. But Travis isn't. And I sat there on the kitchen floor, staring at my phone until my legs went numb, thinking, this is how it starts. This is how they make you look unfit. One clip at a time, one joke, one meme, one moment where they frame you as unstable and let the internet do the rest. And that night I decided I wouldn't let them see me break. Not again. So the next morning I got up, showered, got dressed, and went to Walgreens to clear my head. Not for medicine, not for supplies, just to walk around and feel normal. But when I came out with a bag of mints and a new pair of reading glasses, I couldn't find my car. Not where I parked it, not across the lot, not even in the next row. And for 5 full minutes I stood there thinking, maybe I forgot where I parked, maybe I'm slipping, maybe they're right, and my throat tightened, my ears rang, and I was about 5 seconds from crying in public when I heard the click of the locks and saw Travis stepping out from behind another vehicle, holding my keys, smirking like he'd caught me in the act. And he said, "You wandered off? I figured I'd move it closer for you. And I nodded like it made sense, but inside something snapped because he didn't move the car closer. He moved it so I'd doubt myself, so I'd panic, so I'd spiral, and when I got home, I wrote it all down. May 7th, video posted publicly without consent. Car moved without warning. Public humiliation confirmed. That's when I realized I couldn't wait for help, couldn't trust my instincts alone. I had to start controlling how they saw me, not just reacting to it. And that meant playing dumb, playing slow, giving them what they expected so they'd let their guard down. And when they did, I'd be ready. After the car incident, I stopped trying to convince anyone I was fine and started pretending I wasn't. Not because I was giving up, but because I finally understood the only way to beat Travis was to let him believe he was winning. So I started, leaning into his narrative. I asked where things were even when I knew. I called Kennedy twice in one day and acted like I forgot the first call. I let my PIN slip at checkout and smiled when the cashier looked at me with pity. And the more I played the role, the more careless Travis became. The more often he spoke around me like I wasn't listening, like I wasn't capable of understanding anything he said. And I started documenting every word, every slip, every lie. And it wasn't hard because I already knew how to hide things. Better than him. I was a teacher for 30 years. I've caught cheaters smarter than Travis ever was, so I took my old iPad, taped it inside the laundry vent, and set it to record every time someone came in or out of the house. And after a few days, I caught it, clear as day. Travis pacing in front of the dryer on the phone saying, "She signs anything now, just needs a little push. I'll get her on the deed change next week. She won't remember it 5 minutes later." And I felt nothing when I heard it. No shock, no rage, just cold clarity, because I already knew he was doing this. I just hadn't had proof before, and now I did, and I backed it up twice. Once to my cloud, and once to a flash drive taped behind. The bathroom mirror, and I smiled to myself for the first time in weeks. Not because I was happy, but because the game had shifted, and now I wasn't the prey anymore. I was setting the bait, and I kept pushing, kept pretending to lose things, kept calling Travis by my late husband's name to make him feel confident. And the more I played confused, the more he treated me like a ghost. And that's when I realized something worse than betrayal. He enjoyed it. The power, the control, the smug tone in his voice when he explained basic things like I was 5 years old, the way he exaggerated everything in front of his fiancée, and even Eli started mimicking it, calling me glitch grandma under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear, and every time I wanted to scream, I'd write instead. Page after page in my yellow notebook, not just what happened, but how I felt, disgusted, humiliated, underestimated, and with every page, my plan sharpened. Because I wasn't just going to protect myself, I was going to burn every lie he built to the ground, but I knew I couldn't do it alone, not yet. I needed something else, someone else. Someone who remembered the woman I was before all this, before Travis decided I was disposable, and I knew exactly where to find him. The next morning, I drove out to the American Legion Hall, the one where my husband used to volunteer every second Saturday, folding flags and fixing the coffee machine no one else could figure out. And I hadn't stepped foot in that place since. His funeral, but I needed a name, someone who remembered him, someone who didn't think I was crazy. And when I walked in, the smell of burnt coffee and old carpet hit me like a time machine. And there he was, Carl, sitting at the same corner table where he used to play chess with my husband. Same gray beard, same denim vest. And when he saw me, he stood up slow like he wasn't sure I was real and said, "Shannon? Jesus, you disappeared." And I sat down and didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him everything. From the party, to the locked bank account, to the video online, to the pills that weren't right. And he didn't blink, didn't scoff, didn't patronize. He just nodded once and said, "I figured something was off when your boy came by." And that stopped me cold, and I asked what he meant. And he said, "Travis came through here about 2 months ago asking about your husband's will. Said he needed clarification on military benefits. Said it was for a trust update, or something." And Carl leaned forward, pulled out a wrinkled napkin from his vest pocket, and handed it to me. And on it was a name I didn't recognize. Scott Delaney, a state lawyer out of McKinney. And Carl said, "Your boy was sloppy, Real cocky, too. Thought I was too drunk to notice, but I wrote that down after he left, just in case. And I stared at that napkin like it was the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle finally falling into place, because I knew what that meant. Travis wasn't just gaslighting me for fun. He was getting the paperwork ready, laying the legal traps, changing the documents before I even knew there was a war. And I felt my stomach turn cold, not with fear, but with focus, because now I had a direction, a person to trace, a breadcrumb trail leading back to the knife in my back. And I thanked Carl, told him I owed him dinner, and left before the tears could slip. And when I got home, I called the number on the napkin, not as myself, but pretending to be my own assistant. Said I was confirming an appointment for Ms. Whitaker's estate planning, and the woman on the phone said, "We have you in for next Wednesday, just reviewing the deed transfer forms." And I didn't speak for a second, then said, "Perfect, thank you," and hung up. And I stood there in the kitchen with the phone still in my hand and the world sideways. And that was the moment I realized the final piece was almost in place. The document he needed, the proof he'd sign in my name, and I wrote it down in the notebook. May 9th, Travis initiated estate paperwork under false pretense. Lawyer confirmed appointment. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was being erased on paper before I was ever put in a home, and now I had the receipt. It was 2 days after the call with the lawyer when Kennedy showed up unannounced, standing in my doorway holding a manila envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds. And before I could even ask what she was doing there, she said, "We just want what's best for you, Mom." And I already knew. I already felt it in my chest before she opened her mouth again, and I stepped aside and let her in without a word. Watched her sit down at the kitchen table we've shared for 30 years, the one where I used to help her with homework, the one where she told me she was pregnant with Eli, and she looked at me like I was fragile, like I was already gone. And she slid the envelope toward me and said, "It's temporary guardianship, just until we figure things out." And for a second, I saw myself from her eyes, tired, older, isolated, paranoid, and I almost believed it, almost let the fog creep in again until I remembered the voice recorder in my pocket, the file I'd been saving for this exact moment. And I pulled out my phone, pressed play, and sat it on the table like a weapon, and her face changed the second. Travis's voice came out of that tiny speaker, clear as day, saying, "Just get her to sign, Kennedy. She trusts you more than me. Don't ask questions. Just get her signature." And the sound of him laughing at the end hit like a hammer, and Kennedy's hands were already shaking when she said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's your brother making you his puppet." And she tried to speak, but no words came out, just a breath, just a whisper of guilt and disbelief. And she reached for the envelope again, but I put my hand over it and said, "No, leave it here." And she looked up at me, tears already falling, and said, "I didn't know. I swear to God I thought maybe he told me you'd wandered into the street last week, that you forgot your name." And I nodded slowly and said, "Of course he did, because it's easier than admitting he wants my house, my money, and my name on a death certificate instead of a deed." And she said nothing, just shook her head and whispered, "What do we do?" And I said, "You stop listening to him, and you start remembering who raised you." And that night, after she left, I opened my notebook and wrote, May 11th, Kennedy delivered legal docs manipulated by Travis. Evidence played, doubt planted, loyalty shifting. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something new rising under the fear. Not hope, not yet, but the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. The day I disappeared wasn't dramatic, no middle-of-the-night escape or suitcase dragging down a driveway. I just left, quietly, early in the morning before the sun hit the porch, packed a duffel bag with 3 days' worth of clothes, my notebook, both flash drives, and the iPad with the recordings, and drove 2 hours north to Carl's trailer on a borrowed map route I hadn't used in 20 years. No GPS, no credit cards, no texts, because I needed them to worry. I needed them to feel the absence of control, especially Travis, who'd built his little empire on the assumption that I'd keep standing still, keep absorbing every blow. But when I left, I triggered something else, something he wasn't ready for, because at 7 a.m. sharp, My pre-scheduled email dropped into every inbox I'd ever trusted. My church group, my HOA president, my pharmacist, my former coworkers. Even 3 of Travis's clients I'd found on his LinkedIn. All of them received a file titled, "In Case I'm Not Safe." And inside was a neatly organized folder. Audio files, screenshots of forged appointment calendars, transcripts of manipulated prescriptions, video stills from the hidden laundry cam, voicemail recordings of Travis planning the guardianship. Switch and the crown jewel, a clean, full voicemail where he laughed and said, "She won't even remember signing it. I'll flip the house before she figures it out." And within hours, my phone, left at home on purpose, was blowing up with voicemails, texts, emails, even 2 Facebook posts asking if I was okay. But the real victory came at 3:17 p.m. when Carl got a call from Kennedy, her voice shaky, saying she'd been getting messages all day from people forwarding the email, asking if it was true, if Travis really did all those things, and Carl said, "She didn't ask where I was, just asked if I was safe." And then came the twist I didn't expect. Travis's fiancée, Alyssa, deleted every photo of them off her social media, even the engagement one, and then blocked him, completely wiped him from her online existence, which meant she saw the files too, saw what he'd said, what he'd planned, what kind of man she was about to marry. And just like that, his personal life cracked open from the inside, and I stayed gone for 3 full days. Holed up in Carl's spare trailer, no heat, spotty power, writing everything down by candlelight, reading through the flood of reactions forwarded to me through Carl's email, the messages that said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," or "I never liked how he talked to you," and one that simply read, "Do you need a place to stay?" And I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because this wasn't the end. This was the earthquake before the landslide, and when I returned, I wouldn't be coming back as a victim, or a ghost, or some fragile story people whispered about. I'd be walking back into my house as the woman who took every weapon used against her and turned them into a blueprint for revenge, and when I did, I'd bring all the truth with me, printed, stapled, and ready for court. I walked into that courthouse like I was walking into church the day after the world ended, calm, clean, and not afraid of a single soul in that building, wearing my late husband's navy blue blazer, the one I'd kept in the back of the closet, for funerals and real battles. And as I stepped through security with a manila folder thicker than a Bible, I didn't even flinch when I saw Travis sitting in the hallway pretending to scroll his phone, pretending like he didn't see me, and, for the first time since this entire war started, I felt no fear, no anger, just focus, because now it wasn't about emotion. It was about evidence, and I had it all, stacked, time-stamped, signed, and cross-referenced. And when they called my name, I stood up straight, walked into that courtroom, and greeted the judge like a woman who still remembered how to be respected. And Travis sat across from me with his lawyer, whispering fast, already sweating through his collar, and the judge asked if I had representation, and I said, "No, Your Honor, just the truth." And I handed over the folder, slid it across the table, and waited. And what followed was 23 minutes of quiet reading, audio file playback, and visible discomfort on Travis's side of the room as the judge listened to his own voice echoing from my recordings, saying things like, "She signs anything now," and "Once I've got power of attorney, we flip the house and split it." Before she knows. And then came the medical records, the pharmacy logs, the emails with forged dates, the appointment confirmations I never made, and the judge didn't blink once until he got to the part where I'd been recorded in my own home without consent, and he looked up and said, "Who installed the cameras?" And Travis's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off and said, "You can speak after I'm done reviewing this." And I sat there in absolute silence, because every second that passed was a victory. Every pause a nail in the lie they built around me. And finally the judge leaned back and said, "Mrs. Whitaker, based on this evidence, I am terminating all powers of attorney granted to the defendant, initiating an emergency investigation into medical manipulation and financial abuse, and recommending the DA review this for possible charges." And I didn't react, didn't smile, didn't even move, because I wanted Travis to know this wasn't joy, this was justice. And as we left the courtroom, He tried to look at me, tried to say something. But I walked right past him like he was a stranger on a bench, and when I got outside, I didn't even cry. I just stood there in the sun, letting it hit my face like proof that I still existed, still had my name, my rights, and my mind. And I pulled out my notebook and wrote the only entry that day. May 15th, power returned, truth confirmed, war not over. But I'm not losing. The fallout came fast, faster than even I expected, like watching a dam split open after weeks of quiet pressure. And it started with a phone call from Kennedy 2 days after the hearing, voice shaking as she told me Travis had been let go from his company, not fired exactly, but mutually separated after someone anonymously forwarded a copy of the court documents to his board. And the next day I got an email from my bank confirming full reinstatement of access, with an added note that Travis's authorization had been permanently revoked, and I didn't respond. I just printed the email and taped it inside the front cover of my notebook like a badge, and within a week, the rest started crumbling. His fiancée deleted her entire Instagram account, then came back online without a trace of him. No engagement photos, no wedding plans, nothing but a caption, under a picture of her dog that said, "Peace is worth starting over." And Kennedy told me she'd called her brother just once since the hearing, only to hear him deny everything, say I'd faked it, that I'd tricked the court, and I asked her what she said back, and she paused and then told me. I told him I saw the recordings, and I believed you now, and he said, "Then you're just as crazy as she is," and I hung up. And I didn't say anything to that. I just listened, because what could I say? He chose his war, and he lost it, and now the silence was louder than anything he could have said. And then came the message I'd been expecting, not from Travis, but from Eli. A short email sent late at night that simply said, "I'm sorry." And below it was an attached photo he drew of me and him baking, with me holding a mixing spoon and smiling, and in the corner he'd scribbled, "You're not glitch grandma." And I stared at that for a long time, longer than I should have, because that's what hurt the most. Not the money, not the lies, but the way he'd let his own son turn against me like it was a joke, like I was some meme instead of a person, and I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know how to say, "I forgive you, but I won't forget." And then finally, 1 week after court, I got the last piece of the puzzle, an email from Travis with the subject line, "Closure," and nothing in the body except a single sentence. "You really want to go down like this?" And I didn't open it, didn't forward it, didn't reply. I just flagged it as spam and archived it forever, because the truth was I didn't want closure. I wanted peace, and that meant keeping him out of my house, my inbox, and my life for good. And that night, I opened the back door, lit a small fire in the patio pit my husband built with his own hands, and I dropped in a folded piece of paper I'd been carrying in my wallet for weeks, the guardianship form Kennedy brought me, now singed at the edges, curling black in the flames. And as it burned, I wrote my final notebook entry for that chapter. May 21st, he lost everything except the one thing I never wanted, his regret. I hosted the party exactly 2 months after the night Travis tried to erase me with a smile and a glass of whiskey. But this time, it was my backyard, my guest list, my music playing low over the speakers we'd used since the kids were little. And I made the lemon tart myself, same recipe, same glass tray, but this time my hands didn't shake when I set it down, and only people who'd stood by me were there. Kennedy, Carl, Mrs. Dunley from the church, my old co-worker Janice who'd emailed me after the files dropped to say, "I always knew he gave me a bad feeling." And even Eli came, quiet but present, carrying a grocery bag of fresh strawberries and asking if he could help set the table. And I said yes without hesitation, because I wasn't carrying resentment anymore, just memory, just weight that didn't need to be passed on. And we sat outside under warm lights and laughed like nothing had been stolen. Because it hadn't, not really. I got it all back, my rights, my voice, my name. And when it got quiet, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned that soft orange I always loved, I stood up, raised my glass and said, "If they ever try to take your voice, your name or your mind, don't shout to be heard." Don't beg to be believed. Just wait, watch, and make sure that when you strike back, it's so clean, they never get back up. And there wasn't applause, just stillness, the kind that sinks in, the kind that tells you every single person understood exactly what I meant. And I looked at Kennedy across the table, watched her wipe her eyes, watched Eli pick at a napkin and nod to himself like he'd just learned something he wouldn't forget. And then I sat down, took a bite of tart, and tasted everything that had once been buried, the dignity, the power, the simple right to be seen and heard without being questioned. And I didn't think about Travis, not even once, because the best revenge isn't rage or prison or dragging someone through the mud. It's removing them from your life so completely that they vanish from every future version of yourself. And I didn't need a court date or another confrontation, because I already won. And I didn't just win. I survived, and I walked back into my home, sat at the same table he tried to strip me from, and proved that not only am I still here, but I am sharper than ever, and no one will ever doubt that again.